Evening, good evening. Good evening to you, WeatherBrains episode 963. This is the pre-show, the magical part of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say outrageous things. Hey, it's for the 1st of July, 2024, 963. If you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider up about 8 minutes or 7 minutes. A little late in getting started tonight. I've been running behind here all day. So let's bring in some folks that are waiting to join us. And we'll be on the regular Monday schedule, by the way, for the next few weeks. The next day that will be off on Monday will be on the 29th of July. So we'll do a couple of shows the week before that. All right, got the gang all here.
We can begin.
Keith, can you hear us okay?
I can. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
Excellent.
Aaron, you hear us okay?
Yes, sir.
How easy is this? Years ago, we used Google Hangouts as the platform. We would get these PhD guys. I mean, the smartest men and women in the world with an IQ probably in excess of 300, and they couldn't figure out how to get on Google Hangouts. So
we couldn't figure out how to get on Google Hangouts either.
We couldn't figure it out.
I still have a twitch from those days.
It's
yeah,
what
it was.
It's what Keith and I use day in and day out, and it can be finicky at times. That's for sure.
Yep. Very true.
Yeah, I just got rid of my Skype account, which is what we used to use, James, as the backup. Do you remember those days? Because I'd always have to go record the interview and bring it back.
In fact, when we started the show, we used Skype, and then we morphed to Google Hangouts. And of course, Google Hangouts is morphed into Google Meet, which is much, much better. I mean, Google Meet is like Zoom. It's good, but the Hangouts thing, their software engineering team just never figured it out for some reason. So this is good and simple here. But thank you all for coming on the 4th of July week. I know that a lot of our folks are out. I know that Jen is traveling. I talked to her. I think she was in Florida when we spoke a few days ago. So she is not in Ohio.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, probably. She's on the road. She was in Enterprise a few weeks ago. Neil
Jacobs is probably fishing, knowing him.
Yeah, I just got back. Go for it, James. Sorry.
No. You maybe you know where Neil is.
No, don't know where Neil is. I mean, I just got back from vacation myself. I went all the way up to Mackinac Island up in the Upper Peninsula, which was a nice break from the 100-degree heat down here. It was nice to have like 3 days of 60-degree weather before I had to.
Did y'all go to the Grand Hotel there, Aaron?
I drove past it. We took one of the island tours and the horse-drawn carriages there, so didn't go inside.
It probably cost you $100 just to drive past it. It's expensive.
It is. Everything on that island's a little expensive, but it was an interesting adventure.
What would you get right now, James, for highs in the 60s? What would you trade for that?
Look, I'll take dew points in the 50s. We got that right now. It feels great out here. I mean, come on. Goodness, it feels amazing for the 1st of July at this latitude. It's the dew point in a few spots almost in the 40s to the north of here. So
you get to enjoy it for one day.
Yeah.
What were the lows this morning? Did we have any lows in the 60s up north? I didn't look.
No, the lower dew points didn't really get in here till today after this morning, but we'll have some tomorrow. But we played tennis yesterday, and it was just great. It was about 87, a good breeze. I mean, the dew points were still kind of high, but it was just amazingly pleasant for the end of June. It was great.
Saturday afternoon, we had a dew point of 82 at Pell City.
Ouch.
Probably they just had a shower, I would imagine. It was sort of like a little sauna. Throwing a little water on the old coals there.
Right. That's gross.
Yes, it is. I cannot get to my repository. Why can I not? Google.
Turn it off and on again.
Exactly.
Well,
I have a new
I need to
little
bring that
mini
song back.
keyboard, James. How about that? Gives me a lot more room on my desk now. I
need to find that
and smaller.
Let's see if this is the song.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again. Have you tried turning it off and on again? That normally does the trick.
So you get tech advice on this show that you don't get on the other ones.
From guys with an Irish accent. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
I know Google wants something. It's complaining about something here. That's why I can't get to it.
Well, just give us all your password, and that way we could all get in.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just share the password here.
It won't let me pass this security, managing your security, blah, 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 blah. I know all that. Okay.
And this is some good stuff. I found a soundboard folder that I've not noticed before. Check this out. Boy, this is a classic.
Set up James Spann, partly cloudy today through Saturday with a chance of afternoon and evening thunder showers. High today and Saturday around 90, low tonight near 70, and the chance of rain 20% tonight, 30% tomorrow. I'm Jim Gardner, TBC News. WTBC, Tuscaloosa.
This is my last show when I was in college on the radio. The big 1230, the larger than life 1230 in Tuscaloosa. Here's the Rat Hole song. And play this one.
Rat hole, 43 folders of rat hole, the weekly migrating rat hole, totally off topic rat hole.
I barely remember that.
Occasionally, this whole show is a rat hole sometimes.
That's all right. Yep. Know what we're getting ourselves into then.
Yeah,
exactly. You guys might want to hang up. In fact, welcome to our television viewers. We're at the top of the hour. It's 7 o'clock Central Time. It's the Monday night weather party. The weather is absolutely calm and gorgeous here, so we are not interrupting any weather issues. So we're about to get this thing started. In fact, let's get this thing started, because we're trying to be timely these days. So let me get back to my main and Bill. We do not run the weather call.
No, all done. Although Bruce Thomas is going to join us for a minute after 8:15 or so, just to say hello.
Oh, okay. So
but no recordings or anything, so should be good to go.
All right, track 1 and track 2, and here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Well, in the words of Bill Curtis, we're a big deal. Maybe not, but we're glad you're here. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 963. This is the weekly show for weather geeks, dweebs, nerds, dorks, and weenies. Longest running weather podcast in the universe. We've been going since 2006. And here we are on the 1st of July, 2024. The summer is rolling along. Rick Smith, how hot was it in your neck of the woods today?
Too hot. It was, I don't know what we got to, 100, or it felt like 108 or something like that. Yeah, it's hot.
Too hot. Yeah. Too hot. It's a great song by Kool and the Gang. I bet you James ate a lot. You never heard Kool and the Gang. This is before your time.
No, that's kind of in that late 70s wheelhouse for me. But they did not discuss the 118-degree heat index that we saw Saturday. Highest Tulsa heat index in June records.
Well, that's nasty. That's just nasty.
And would you believe,
we're down here.
I was going to say, would you believe that's not the highest heat index that Tulsa has seen with a temp below 100? We had a 122 back in 1989.
Darn.
I think Rick just hung up.
Yeah. We lost him.
Do they keep heat index values in ACES?
So no, we've got a Excel spreadsheet of every MEDAR from Tulsa International going back to 1930. So it lets us on these summer days do nothing but play with Excel and fight
That
boredom.
sounds like fun.
Spreadsheet fun is the new show title so far. Spreadsheet fun in the heat. No, our dew point, we got dew points in the 50s over here. It is, I mean,
What?
I stepped outside after the 6 o'clock news. It just feels, the sky is cobalt blue. It looks like October. And we got dew points in the 50s and a fresh north breeze. It feels amazing. So
let's have a football game.
And of course, you can almost hear footballs flying, but we all know that dew points will be back sooner than later. And we do know we have a hurricane to talk about. We will get to that when we go to the weather roundup. We'll talk about
156 mile per hour flight level wind. Just
wow,
even adjusted.
Yeah. It's amazing that thing today just maintained its symmetry. It just from a perspective of looking at this in nature, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be involved in it, but goodness gracious, it's awfully impressive. And we'll talk about Barrel before we get out of here and the ultimate track. I see Troy Kimmel. I think the Southeastern Conference is all in Austin, Texas. Isn't that right, Troy?
Yeah, officially today, the full day, big celebration, University of Texas yesterday or last night. Yep.
And so, have you seen Smith, that new SEC shorts about the new 2 kids in school, James? It is hilarious about Oklahoma and Texas. Their first day at school.
No,
you gotta watch this thing. It is.
I need to get that. Rick Smith, what's the opinion of folks there in Norman of the SEC situation?
James's hand signal just really told you all you need to know there. The Longhorns still go upside down, and no, I think people are excited. I don't know. I mean, it's a big, huge deal in Norman today. There's a big event going on. It started last night. There's concerts in the stadium tonight. The SEC network is there. So I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun.
So Bill Murray, does Texas or Oklahoma come to Tuscaloosa this year?
Alabama goes to Oklahoma. I'm not certain of the Texas part of our schedule, whether they're on our schedule or not. That's a good question. I should know that, but I do know we go to Oklahoma. So,
and thank you for listening to Football Brains.
That's right.
Gotta have a little bit of football
brains
out of this football rut we're in here, please.
Oh, as I was just in the chat, I was about to ask Bill if he was going to come out to Oklahoma to watch the Alabama game.
I just started thinking about that, Kim. I think that's got to happen. I think that's just gotta happen.
Right? It's going to be a really, really interesting time one way or the other, and it would be great to have you. So sorry, I utterly failed to pull us out of Football Brains. But how about we welcome our guests?
Are we ready to do that? Let's say, Mr. Host, if you're ready, I'll do it. Tonight's first.
Roll it. Let's go.
Tonight's first guest, WeatherBrain, is a National Weather Service meteorologist. I think he's still on temporary assignment at Rapid City, South Dakota. Keith, yes or no? Okay. He turned a childhood fear of thunderstorms into a career focused on public safety with experience in forecasting and research. And outside of work, he enjoys music, traveling, and hiking. Keith Sherburne, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We are so excited to have you here tonight, and looking forward to it. I love your background and how the sun's rays are just coming out of your head. That just your grandma's got to be proud of that picture right there.
Well, I'm sure she is. Yeah, and you can thank my wife for that. It's a tapestry behind me. It's actually on the wall here. So
it's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. That's a real background.
It sure is. Yep.
Good. And tonight's other guest, WeatherBrain, is a National Weather Service meteorologist focused on protecting lives and property by communicating severe weather risks, serving as the Severe Weather Program Coordinator and lightning safety expert for the Weather Service. He owns or holds a BS in meteorology from the University of Oklahoma, so he's enjoyed all this conversation so far, and an MS in emergency management from Jacksonville State University, a place that is near and dear to a lot of our hearts. Aaron Treadway, with your cool degrees there, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having us. Yeah, it's been a fun combination of getting to apply what I learned in that MS degree in emergency management to my meteorology background. So lovely to be here.
James A., that's what your master's is in, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Emergency management.
Woohoo! Yeah. It was funny, and James will remember this because on our Alabama WX weather blog, local, media firm approached us and said, the Jacksonville State University folks are starting up an emergency management degree and want to advertise on your blog. And they made this spectacular commercial for it. And I assume you might have seen this commercial somewhere along the way, Aaron, where they went out and actually shot, on this disaster site, this someplace that was like either under demolition or something, but they shot a big video, with a lot of first responder, actors and folks. And it was a really cool video, but when it came on, it had this sound of a chainsaw. And the first morning we ran it, James, do you remember? It was an auto run video. And I think you got about 6,000 complaints, if I remember correctly.
Yes. I think it was more like 7,000. Yes.
Yeah. Well, every one of those folks was upset, but, we had to kind of convince them to get over it and find a way so they could turn it off. So once they've heard it once, they didn't have to hear it again. But I got summoned to see the president of Jacksonville State. And, he wanted to talk about his advertising campaign. I was like, okay. So I go with the ad guy and we walk in. I have no idea what he's going to say. And I thought he was going to, fuss at me and pull the ad by and, figure out that, hey, it wasn't worth it. He said, I don't know what you're doing. He said, but please keep doing it because it's made our program super fantastic. And it's all because of James Spann, of course. But in any case, it still worked. And I still love that ad. That ad is kind of cool. But Keith, I kind of spilled the beans on, your background and why you got into weather, but expand on that a little bit and tell us that. And then I'll ask you the same question, Aaron.
Sure thing. Yeah. I think a lot of people have a similar story when it comes to why they got into weather. It was some big event when they were a kid. But a lot of my early memories, childhood memories, were actually of weather related events. Like when I lived in Michigan before we moved down to Tennessee, I remember taking shelter during a tornado warning, heard all the sirens going off, heard the green, or saw the green sky as we were going down to the basement. You mentioned the fear of storms when given my introduction there. And I distinctly remember jumping into my sister's arms when it was thundering and hiding my face in her arms, because I was afraid of the thunder and lightning at the time. But we moved down to Tennessee in 1994. My dad was with General Motors and they had a new plant open down there. So we picked up and moved down to Tennessee. And when I think it would have been 9 years old, there was the 1998 Nashville tornado outbreak. And that was my first real experience that I could remember, at least, of watching wall-to-wall coverage on TV of tornado warnings. We had all of the tower cam imagery of the tornado coming into Nashville. I remember News Channel 5 got knocked off the air and they didn't have any audio, but they had video. So they were trying to write on, pieces of paper to give people updates and so forth. So that was really my motivation for joining the field in general, being involved in meteorology in some degree, was to try to help keep people safe after living through that outbreak. And as I got a little bit older, got into high school, my chemistry teacher really was instrumental in fostering the interest I had in meteorology and the sciences in general. And that led to me applying to several colleges for meteorology, including the University of Oklahoma. So I actually went to school with Aaron there for a while, graduated with my BS in meteorology from Oklahoma. But along that route, the Weather Service always kind of felt like the most direct link for me between meteorology, the science, and public safety. So I just found it to be an ideal overlap of my skill set, my background in math and science, and what my motivations were for getting me into the field in the first place. So when I got to OU, I had an opportunity to participate in an internship with the SBC out there. Between my undergrad and grad work, I volunteered with the National Weather Service office in Nashville during the summer. So that was my first real experience in a standalone WFO. I'd kind of been to the Norman WFO before, but that was my first time getting in there and going out to help out with, outreach events. We went down to Bonnaroo one time. That was really cool, seeing how they use weather information. But then once I got to NC State, so I went to North Carolina State for my master's and my PhD. My research there entailed a lot of collaborative efforts with different weather service offices across the East Coast and into the Southeast. So that included Birmingham and Huntsville when I was there. Began volunteering at the Raleigh office, kind of got a sense of what the operations were really like. And then after I started working on my PhD, I ended up getting a Pathways internship at Raleigh and was almost working there full time before I ended up applying for some other weather service jobs and ended up here in Rapid City.
So Keith, talk about for a second before we go to Aaron and find out about his entree. Talk about those various programs the Weather Service has and how important they are for students that are going into our field and how they access them.
Sure thing. Yeah, the Pathways internship, and Aaron, I know, was a SCEP. I can't remember what that exactly that stands for at the moment. That was the precursor to the Pathways internship, essentially. And what's really beneficial there is you get on-the-job experience within a different weather service office, or sometimes you work at a national lab or a national center. But the point is you're getting this on-the-job experience and getting a sense of what it's really like to work there. So it's a step beyond just volunteering, where you can shadow, you can kind of help out with stuff from time to time. Here in those internships, you're really writing the products yourself, you're QCing the data that comes in, you're sending out products to the web and to the public, to your end users. And I just find that to be the most beneficial experience that you can get, is the actual on-the-job training. The internships like the one I got with the SPC, that was great for just shadowing. I think I was a sophomore at the time. Great experience and exposure to just what the Storm Prediction Center operations are like on the whole. Of course, I was familiar with what they did, but really seeing what happens during a big severe weather event. I think I was there during the Kazoo City, Mississippi tornado back in the day. But just seeing the tempo and all of the things they have to do on a given day, especially a high impact day like that one, can help motivate what you do from there on and really help you decide, okay, either this isn't what I want to do, right? I want to explore other options, or this is what I want to do. How do I continue to take steps to get there and make the most of every opportunity that comes up? So yeah, between volunteering and the unpaid internships and then the paid internship like the Pathways program, all of it's great experience. All of it's going to help you get that foot in the door and make connections that will benefit you down the line. But each of those experiences builds on the other. And basically by the time you're either a SCEP as Aaron was, or a Pathways intern, you're pretty much ready to take the reins and be a full-time employee.
Now, how does the Hollings program work into that, Keith? And then Aaron, you kind of add in. I know you're nodding a whole bunch, so I'm sure you're champing at the bit to jump in here and talk about the same things Keith is, and then we want to hear about your background. But you go first, Keith.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'll be quick here to hand it off to Aaron. I had the opportunity to have an Hollings internship too. I worked with NSSL for a summer in Norman. That's a little bit different because it's just basically a 10-week program where you're working on a research project. So that's your main objective there. You still make the connections, right? But it's a little bit geared more towards research and what that next step is in terms of your academic career. Like you go on to a master's or PhD typically thereafter. You don't have to, but that's a typical path. The La Penta internship, which is I think primarily geared toward underrepresented groups in meteorology and atmospheric sciences, that's pretty similar to the Hollings internship. I think it's similarly a summertime program. But all of those are great. I mean, if you're a student in meteorology, as an example, I would just say apply to as many opportunities as you can, because you never know where those are going to lead. I'll say that for professionals as well. You never really know where those opportunities are going to lead, but especially when you're a student and just starting to make those connections, those are extremely valuable.
Excellent. Aaron, you add on to that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, to echo Keith, that experience, even if it is an unpaid internship, if you're a high school senior or a college freshman, interested in meteorology, even if it's not paid, getting in the door and being able to put on some future resume that, hey, you you volunteered at a WFO all summer and shadowed meteorologists and, got help writing the products, or doing the Pathways program now, which is a huge open door to getting into the Weather Service. If that's your path. I unfortunately had friends who even had better grades than I did, but because I had a lot of that experience, in addition to being a SCEP at the Austin San Antonio office through my college days, I also did some summer research projects here at OU. One of those was the SHAVE project. Basically, it was through NSSL and gathering high density hail data to actually build a hail swath. And so that experience too was really, really key, to be able to put on a resume. But kind of rewinding a little bit about my history, just like Keith, I grew up afraid of meteorology, or not afraid of meteorology, but afraid of storms. And that, fueled my interest. The nerdy thing that I always say is I was the kid in kindergarten printing off the 5-day forecast from and I'll name drop KView since I know that Troy used to work there, from KView, and bringing that as my show and tell thing for kindergarten. And at the same time, I would go home and for me, it was hiding under the bed during a strong thunderstorm. But, as I learned more, I understood more, and very much fueled that passion to help other people kind of understand how weather is going to impact them. So came up here to OU. The other kind of funny anecdote there is I had been looking really focused at Texas A&M University. My mom had bought all of her maroon gear, and I was ready to go to that meteorology program. But my senior year of high school, my senior calculus professor or teacher, who was a staunch UT Longhorn, which we all know that UT and OU don't like each other, pulled me aside one afternoon and was like, "Have you looked at OU's meteorology program?" And I hadn't, because I wanted to stay close to home. I came up here. It was the first year that they were building the National Weather Center. So, Keith and my freshman class were basically the first year to get into the National Weather Center and rub shoulders with Rick and SPC and NWS. Came up here, lucked out with the SCEP program, and then again getting into the WFO and seeing what they do on a day-to-day basis, and also for me getting to do that from my home area. I grew up in South Central Texas, so I got to go home and forecast for my parents, my friends, my cities. And then once I graduated, got to luck out too and go right back and have full-time positions there. That is kind of a rarity, and one kind of important thing is Pathways maybe at one WFO like Keith out in Raleigh, but he's ended up now in the Northern Plains. I was lucky enough to be able to go back to my home office and was there for 10 years as a forecaster. So the rest is history.
And I want Rick to get to jump in here before he has to go in a minute. But Aaron, I would second what you said in kindergarten, but we never had heard of printers by that point. And I think we were doing 2-day forecasts back then. But Rick Smith, you jump in. I know you obviously know Aaron.
Yeah, I know Aaron and
Keith, and share some information from your perspective about these critical programs.
Yeah, it's always so cool to see people that have come through the office as job shadows, volunteers, SCEPs, pathways, whatever you want to call them. I can't overemphasize the importance of those programs. Hollings, REU, the Pathways program now. SCEP is what it was before, and what I got into the Weather Service when it was even older, called the Student Trainee Program. So I wouldn't be here without that opportunity. So every little thing that you can do makes a difference. I tell students all the time, just shadow in an office, just go visit an office. The weather community is such a small world. Just that one impression can make all the difference. So yeah, I can't overemphasize and agree with what Keith and Aaron said more. Just take every opportunity you have. So I'm glad to see you guys are moving on and up. So yeah.
Well, outstanding, Rick. Thank you for adding that insight. Aaron, talk about your current job right now, what your role is, and what's all involved in it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a big change from, those 10 years of day-to-day forecasting and the shift work and, issuing warnings in the WFO. Just kind of was looking for a change at that point and saw this opportunity. So I work for National Weather Service headquarters, and we have 11 service programs up here at headquarters. Basically, if you think of any type of weather like tropical, which we'll get to, they have a program manager, program coordinator, and so I am the program coordinator for the severe program, and we basically help kind of facilitate the research to operations, any of the NWS policy. Anytime there are issues that arise, we help coordinate with the regions and then down to the offices for that. So it's a lot more kind of project management, goal-oriented type stuff, pushing things like threats in motion, mutual aid, helping continue modernize the post-storm data program, kind of that focused more the operational stuff that the WFOs handle. And there are days that I miss that operational side of things. I don't necessarily miss working at 3 a.m. on those mid shifts, but I do miss working with the media partners, the EM partners. But we are the champions here at headquarters for those WFOs. To get the new technology, the new tools, and to be their support. I think that would be one of the biggest things that Keith and I, would love to champion. That Kevin Laws, who is a friend of y'all's, who is our current acting program manager, with Champion is here. We're here to support the field, and really, help out where we can. So that's kind of what the day in and day out looks like. It's a lot of meetings, but it's also a lot of fun to see a lot of the hard work that Keith and I and Kevin do, translate down to the field, and successes there.
Yeah, we're really grateful to Kevin for introducing the idea that you guys be on the show. So we owe him a tip of the hat tonight for that, because he's been really excited to work with you guys. Keith, add to that what you do and kind of how your role fits in to that in the bigger picture, notwithstanding what you're doing on a daily basis now.
Sure thing. Yeah, but my permanent role, I guess, is as a meteorologist at the Rapid City Weather Forecast Office up here in South Dakota. Since late March, I've been the acting Severe Weather Program Coordinator, so working with Aaron and more recently Kevin. Just to add a little bit there for the Severe Program side, broadly speaking, I'd say our responsibility is really to kind of develop the vision and execute the mission of the National Weather Service's Severe Weather Program. So we monitor and assess the performance day-to-day operations. We'll lead initiatives to improve severe weather operations on the whole in the Weather Service. We help develop the training priorities throughout the year. We assist with, creating and disseminating safety materials as well. So Aaron and I have both been working and having some meetings with like the National Park Service on lightning safety messaging. So that's been a lot of fun. And the daily and weekly tasks in pursuit of this effort vary quite a bit. We do a lot of collaboration with both the local offices, regional offices, and also the SPC. So that's just discussing severe weather operations and how we can improve in future events. We collaborate with researchers at NSSL and sometimes academia, other NOAA labs in these research to operations efforts as well. Part of that is also developing new tools for us to get into our operations to make what we do a little bit more efficient. Then we work with social scientists as well, like Kim. We had a meeting with Kim earlier this morning to evaluate how end users might interpret our products and take protective actions based upon those products. So, ultimately we serve as government-wide contacts for severe weather inquiries as well. So we're occasionally tasked with providing updates on, say, the number of tornado warnings and reports of a certain period of time. Got a lot of attention this spring with the pretty active April and May. And just in general, we focus on the NWS performance during notable events as well. So that's just kind of a glimpse into the different kinds of things that we can do within the severe weather program.
Okay, so let's kind of break that down a little bit, Keith, and then you, Aaron. What are some initiatives and things that you can share with us right now? Because there are probably things you can't tell us at this point, but what might be some specific things that you're working on right now that improve the warning process?
Yeah, I'd say generally speaking, in terms of the warning process, a key challenge that we face right now is providing equitable information within warnings and equitable lead time in warnings as well. We recognize that not all of our end users are going to have the same needs when it comes to warning. or warnings. So 5 to 10 minutes might be sufficient for some folks to go ahead and take shelter, get in their safe space, but it may not be sufficient for some populations to protect themselves. That includes, folks in mobile and manufactured homes, as an example. We also recognize that our current warning paradigm and the software that we use is not really that efficient at promoting those equitable lead times that we're looking for. So, we're really working to address both of these items. There's a new initiative through NWS headquarters that you may hear more about in the future called community-centric warnings. We want to consider community-specific attributes and vulnerabilities within the warning process. So that's kind of the first step in going towards that direction. And the second, in terms of the, actually making the software work in the way that we want it to, is hopefully going to be alleviated by threats in motion, which is going to provide more rapid and routine updates to warnings that are issued both in time and space. So those are a couple of initiatives, and one's a tool or a technique that we're really excited about. And I'll let Aaron fill in the gaps there too.
Yeah, and James fan, we started this show we were just on the verge of Polygon warnings. How long have we been hearing about threats in motion? Then we'll put Aaron on the spot. When can we expect it to be here? James, how long do you think we've been talking about threats in motion? 2009?
A long time. Facets, threats in motion.
Will it happen in our lifetime?
It'll hopefully happen in your lifetime. I mean, it is still very much a work in progress. And Keith mentioned the community-centric warnings, and that is the threats in motion is a big puzzle piece of that initiative that Ken Graham is pushing. And a lot of the focus now, here in Norman, we have the hazardous weather test bed, and they're still constantly testing and improving threats in motion from the forecaster side of things. But kind of the next big challenge that we're tackling with it is the dissemination side of the house. So, how does weather radio handle, faster updates to these warnings? How do y'all as media partners, handle these with the crawls, handling that flow of information into your, offices? How do EMs respond to this increased, flow of information with faster updated warnings? So that's really our focus. We've had conversations in the last week or two with Kevin of how we can even tackle or start tackling some of those dissemination issues with threats in motion over the next year, because, Keith and I are in the same boat, and, we've been hearing about this for a while, and we want to get our hands on it because we do see that value of the equitable lead time and see a lot of the benefits there in threats in motion. But I would say one of the other initiatives that we kind of both are passionate about, Keith and I, is a lot of mutual aid. So, one of Ken Graham's big sayings as director of the Weather Service is that we are one weather service, regardless of us being, 122 WFOs in all the national centers. And so, Keith and I are both passionate about forecasters helping other forecasters, because we all have unique abilities and unique kind of focus areas that we're really passionate about. Keith's being mesoanalysis, mine being more the social media and social science side of the house. And so we're both involved in initiatives within the Weather Service, remote mesoanalysis, where offices help other offices with mesoanalysis. Mine is Savvy, yet another acronym, but basically we just help each other data mine. And so, if we have a big hurricane or a big severe weather event, we get a lot of reports coming through social media, and Savvy helps funnel those into the office so that they can, focus on the warning operations. And we are focused on expanding these mutual aid efforts to several other initiatives and really figuring out ways where on a clear weather day in the East, we can be helping out offices that have active weather in the West, or, flip that around. Keith may be quiet up north, but it may be active down here in the South. How can he help, the fellow forecaster across the Weather Service? So that's another big initiative that we're working on, not just in the severe program, but in several areas of the Weather Service.
All right, that's spectacular stuff, and I'm glad to hear these terms talked about so I can get familiar with them. And now we have an overarching term, mutual aid. That sounds pretty cool. Now, talk a little more about Savvy. That sounds really interesting to me. Kim, have we talked about that before? And I know you're going to want to jump in and get into the social science and, part of it here. So you jump in too, whenever you're ready. And
sure. But to answer your question about Savvy, if we have talked about it, it's been a really long time. So it would be good to get an update anyway. But yeah, it's a really neat initiative. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so it actually started in Southern Region and just a couple of offices, doing this for each other. And Trevor Boucher was really instrumental in this and taking it to a national scale. And so, yeah, basically, if there's a big event, an office can say, hey, we would love Savvy assistance. And that kind of request works the same way for the other mutual aid across the Weather Service of saying, hey, we'd love some help. But in Savvy's case, yeah, we just are able, since Twitter or X, never gonna get used to calling it X, but since that's open, since Facebook is open, we can data mine and go to media partners. So if we were helping out Kevin's office in Birmingham, one of us as Savvy volunteers may have James's Facebook page and Twitter pulled up, and so that the second that we see that picture of a tornado or that report of flash flooding, we can put that in a chat to the Birmingham office and say, hey, we just found this on social media. And a lot of offices have that social media person, especially for the bigger and bigger weather events. They have somebody dedicated to both the, getting the input of social media and then also the output from the office. But we're just that extra kind of help there to, funnel that in, especially for bigger events like hurricanes, where we can be Savvy assistants for 3 and 4 and 5 WFOs at a time because we have those multiple impacts across the wide area. So that's kind of in a nutshell what Savvy is. We're continuing to expand new things like potentially issuing work LSRs to take that off the plate of the other offices. And again, we're just all kind of helping each other in these processes. Same thing for the remote mesoanalysis, and I kind of want to give Keith a softball there so he can talk about that, because I enjoy hearing Keith talk about his RMA stuff. But we know that in the warning decision time, that knowing what the atmosphere is doing plays a key role in that warning decision. And that's really kind of what RMA is all about, that remote mesoanalysis, to help the forecaster know what the atmosphere is doing. So yeah, Keith, do you want to jump in and share a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I would echo a lot of the comments that Aaron made there. It's so important that we continue to find ways to leverage the expertise of our meteorologists, no matter where they are. We're, as Aaron said, we're both really passionate about making mutual aid and these different subject matter expert cadres a bigger part of our day-to-day operations, including during these impactful severe weather events, because I mean, that's how our service as a whole is lifted up. If we ensure that we kind of have that wisdom of the crowd approach. And that's, I think, what the RMA program really in particular provides, is we have a chat room on Google Spaces where basically anyone from the region can come in. There's a single facilitator that kind of keeps the chat room going. But all of these subject matter experts from across the region, central region, and then only recently, I think within the last couple of years, it's expanded to the entire CONUS. And so you have folks from, maybe Florida or somewhere in the Northeast or down in Texas who have experienced different types of events throughout their careers and are able to bring those experiences into this chat room and provide, kind of going back to that on-the-job training, right? But that perspective that you may not have, or I may not have up here in the Northern Plains. If it's an environment that you would typically see, say, in the cool season in the southeastern US, and we're experiencing that in the high plains, those folks in the southeast who are probably going to be, having relatively quiet weather, if we're dealing with a pretty big severe weather outbreak up here, they can jump in that chat room and they can provide their insights and their perspectives. I've personally served as facilitator in a couple of pretty big events. One of those was the December 10th, 2021 outbreak, which is kind of known as the Mayfield outbreak now, because that was one of the cities in Kentucky that was significantly damaged or impacted by a tornado there, a long track tornado. And it's just it's a humbling experience in some ways, because you're sitting thousands of miles away watching this unfold, knowing what the office is going through, knowing what the communities or having a sense of what the communities are going through. You can't really know unless you're there. but just being able to kind of zoom out from time to time, because they're so focused in on the storms that are impacting their communities, that they know what's going on when there's a debris ball on the radar and hitting Mayfield as an example. You can zoom out and provide perspective on what's going to be happening an hour or two down the line, because you've been looking into all this mesoanalysis information, this environmental data, high res models as well. Those are a big component, like the Warn-On forecast system. Looking at all this data, trying to synthesize it so they can get a little bit extra lead time as that long track supercell and tornado continues downstream. And fortunately, that was what we were able to do on that particular night with the Louisville weather forecast office. Paducah was going through everything with Mayfield and that long track supercell. It was going to move into Louisville's area. And as a facilitator, I was able to say, okay, look, the environment's not changing, right? There's nothing in the way of this storm. We know it's going to continue on its track. And so I was privately chatting in a separate chat room with the folks making the warning decisions in Louisville. And they were able to have the confidence to provide longer warnings, so provided more lead time for their potentially vulnerable communities to take shelter. So that was a big success. It's been successful in a lot of different events as well. And there have been some service assessments, including that one in the December 2021 event, that have encouraged the use of mutual aid like that and further initiatives in the future. So we think that's a big success story. And ultimately, I think Aaron and I see that as part of the vision of the Weather Service going forward, especially the SPHERE program.
So Aaron, does it work for hurricanes too? Or are there other mutual aid programs that the Weather Service is involved at as we enter this crazy hurricane season, looking at a 940 millibar central pressure now in Beryl? It's dropping like a rock again tonight. Hopefully it won't impact the United States to a great degree, but obviously there are going to be others this year.
Right. So I would say for the hurricanes right now, Savvy is kind of one of the big ones, but there are also other mutual aid efforts. There's a big Spanish mutual aid effort. It's called MOS, Mutual Aid in Spanish. And a lot of what they do is they do get back involved with the hurricane stuff, and they not just translate things that the National Hurricane Center and the offices are putting out into Spanish if the office doesn't have a Spanish speaker at the office, but they do also a lot of the media interviews for Spanish. Again, we get those, especially along the Gulf Coast and especially in Central and South Texas. But the offices don't always have a Spanish speaker either on staff or in the office. And so MOS handles that. We also have a GIS, a mutual aid group that helps with mapping, both pre and post storm, creating GIS maps, creating story maps post storm, where the offices can summarize the event. And so those are some of the bigger ones that we kind of have active right now. But again, going back to kind of the point that Keith made, we are always trying to see where we can expand these areas of mutual aid. Right now, he and I are working with our Operations Proving Ground in Kansas City on another potential mutual aid initiative that, we're just now in the early stages of potentially exploring through actually, involving forecasters from across the Weather Service. So, it's one of those things where, Savvy came out of a grassroots effort in Southern region. RMA came out of a grassroots effort in Central region. And that is what Keith and I have the passion for, is bringing these ideas that come out of a few offices to a region to the Weather Service, because we really do see the benefit in them for all types of weather. Savvy, we've done atmospheric river events in California, big severe weather events, flash flooding. We've done a couple of wildfires. So, Savvy is across the board. Keith, I'm not sure if y'all have expanded really just beyond severe weather into either winter or tropical, but, we want to continue expanding all of these efforts to cover all of our bases, really.
Yeah, I will say that there was a little bit of testing of doing remote mesoanalysis for snow squalls this past winter. So we're trying to expand into other initiatives, but severe is the big one so far. Yeah.
So talk about the HR side of that for a minute. It sounds like a tremendous way to engage folks, all over the country, and adds to their indispensability as forecasters and the human element of weather. But how do you deal with overtime and scheduling and the union and any of those kinds of things? Do those issues rear their ugly heads in any way? Yeah, got crickets now.
Want me to take that?
I don't blame you. Yeah, the third rail.
Keith, you can start because I
I can start.
Thoughts on that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of the overtime comp time policies, that's something that's still kind of a work in progress for us, and it leads to something that Aaron and I are working on right now. Actually, is we're in the process of scheduling a meeting with all of the leaders and coordinators of these different mutual aid initiatives, so we can all get on the same page going forward, because it's going to be such a fundamental piece of weather service operations in the future. So that's one thing. Another item I'll say, we haven't really had complaints from the union, I don't think. Aaron, if you know of anything else, you could chime in. But I don't think there have been many complaints from the union. I think people are really seeing the benefit of it in a lot of different ways. And the way that I see it, and if I ever hear someone who's complaining about mutual aid or something like that for whatever reason, I see it as just providing so many opportunities to people at the local level, while also making our operations more flexible, while also making sure that we're providing the best service in every event. So I don't see a lot of cons to any of those. I think there are a lot of folks that I'll use my experience as an example. So I came in with a PhD, or I finished my PhD when I was at the Rapid City office. But there are a lot of folks who come in with advanced degrees now and may have a lot of other opportunities outside the Weather Service that weren't necessarily there, say 20 or 30 years ago. That could be in private industry, that's in academia, that's in research. And they get at a certain WFO where they're an entry-level meteorologist. They get involved in operations, they get involved in projects and things like that locally and maybe regionally, but there's still something missing because they have this skill set, this expertise that they honed for 2 to 4 to 6 years, depending on how long they went to school or did experience, had other jobs before this. And they're just not able to use that experience and those skills a lot of the time. So these mutual aid initiatives, as we build them out, we have folks who are really adept at social media. We have individuals who are really good at developing graphics that speak to people and communicate information clearly. And yet they're often not doing those things. It's very rare. It's a small percentage of their job. So why don't we give them the opportunity to do more things that they enjoy, offer them the opportunity to use their skill sets in a way that benefits everyone? So that's kind of how I sell not social media, how I sell mutual aid. And I'll turn it over to Aaron after that very smooth transition.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with pretty much everything, Keith has to say there, because I think the benefit isn't just people getting to use their skill sets that they're bringing to the table, but I think that helps with morale and the longevity. If somebody ends up, because you don't always end up at the office that you want to, and you may have to move around the Weather Service. So maybe somebody who is really passionate about severe weather ended up somewhere in the Rockies or in the Northeast where, yes, they've had severe weather this year, but they don't get it as often. They can volunteer with RMA and throughout the spring be able to help out. Or like Keith was saying, for something like Savvy, maybe the office doesn't do a bunch of social media and they get to data mine for these hurricanes and see the impacts of these things. And yet they're at a Montana office and are never going to get a hurricane. So I think it adds to both the experience and, just the kind of morale level. And to go back to Bill's question real quick, I think Kim has a question that we can get to in just a second. But, we run these through the union before they're kind of expanded to the national level. And so we have their approval and everything runs through, RMA managers and the facilitators, and Savvy has similar things. So we have kind of ways to facilitate them that, benefit the programs while also trying to minimize, the impacts on shift work and everything like that. And it is a balance at the end of the day. But yeah, what's your question, Kim?
Thanks, Aaron. I'm loving the model and how it makes such great use of so much of the skill. that, like you said, is in pockets everywhere in the Weather Service. And I think what I'm wondering about is, has there been any envisioned edge to that? Like, I mean, there's so many things that you can use remote support for, but what about things like warnings? And I'll use severe weather warnings as an example. Is that something that there's conversation about pulling up into, a virtual support function? What could this possibly look like? Or are there some things that we're still trying to keep local for some particular reason? So just putting on my social science hat, especially for things like warnings, I can't help but wonder what our partners would think if they were getting them from a non-local source. I mean, part of the risk communication piece is trust and all of the things that come with being, embedded in a place. And that could be difficult to farm out. So sorry, that was a little bit of a winding question, but Keith or Aaron, I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I'll start off here and then I'll let Aaron take it from there. But Aaron mentioned that there is an evaluation ongoing through the Operations Proving Ground that we're kind of participating in and overseeing, just trying to get a sense of what the results are going to be. And that is based on a convective warning mutual aid. There is a pilot experiment ongoing within Central Region. It's a handful of offices. It's pretty small scale right now. But the way that they're looking at it within that project or initiative is you're not necessarily taking over for another office and issuing those warnings for them. What the purpose of that initiative is you have these local offices that still have somebody working the radar, typing up or drawing out the warning polygons, typing up the warning product, but you have subject matter experts who are video chatting with them, kind of discussing what they're seeing on radar, how based on the radar presentation and based on satellite and lightning and all this other information that you consider, how should you flare out or shape the polygon based on how the hazards may evolve with time. So that's kind of where we're going for that, or in that regard at the current time. I will say to your point that, there was some lot or local office team feedback that was solicited nationwide a couple of years ago as we started talking about where we're going in the future in the National Weather Service. And one of the most important things for a lot of the local offices was maintaining those local warnings. So I think we're trying to strike a balance and figure out how to incorporate all this knowledge to make the services better while still keeping that those close local relationships intact. And Aaron, if you have anything to add, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I really like, the pilot project and the way that we're looking at it of kind of that little birdie on the shoulder, the whisper in the ear, however you want to describe it, in terms of that warning mutual aid, that it doesn't take that out of the hands of the local office. Because the other thing, and this gets back to Kim's point, is that local forecaster knows those local roads, knows where that local, mobile and manufactured home, community might be, knows the communities and the EMs and the needs of the area. So it's really, a dual layer, going back to the heart of mutual aid of trying to improve our services, of saying, hey, you've got the local expertise of knowing those impacts, and you've got that added expertise of that, maybe, expert radar person over your ear saying, hey, you're seeing this, maybe flare that polygon out a little bit more, and having that conversation back and forth to, get an excellent result there, and working as a team. That was one of the cool things, that our office used to do, is warning teams, and having that communication back and forth really makes the expertise there grow and increases the quality of the warning at the end of the day, while still getting it out in a timely manner, while still applying those local impacts and that local knowledge from that forecaster. So yeah.
That is so neat to hear about. I love the deliberative co-creation kind of idea. I mean, some flavor of this has been thought about for a really long time. I mean, it wasn't quite 10 years ago that we had the introduction of some bills in Congress that sought to regionalize the Weather Service, but they preserved one piece. The warning coordination meteorologist was to be local and stay with emergency management, in part this recognition by even Congress. I mean, it's very widely understood that this is a very important connection point. And they ultimately abandoned that idea then. But I think we can all see and feel how a distributing across space could make the impetus for having people at a local level different. I still appreciate that there is this recognition of the value of having those relationships. And there's something irreplaceable about it. And so there's just a lot of organizational innovation that you can consider to try to balance these things. It's all a big balancing act. But I do appreciate the creativity that's being brought. I think my and this is something I think I've told folks at OPG too. I think something just our whole field can reflect on is before we make changes to our communication system, that are really substantial, we can just make sure that we get feedback from our partners too, so we can understand if something is a big deal or not. Another related issue to this, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I'm going to open the AI box. So a big question that I think is facing our field is, when can we use AI to automate and generate a forecast product? And when does it need a human either in the loop, so being part of the process of generating the forecast, directly, or over the loop, just sort of supervising the creation of the forecast? I think that this kind of question, we need to really start asking ourselves, when and where and in what processes do we need humans to be both either the creating something like wholesale, it is a human judgment, hands off anything else, and it's local, or it's a super skilled person, remote, but which one is better? I mean, these are all really interesting social science questions, really, as long as we keep central that we want to provide the best service. So I would just love to hear from either of you what you think about that bear I just poked.
Before I get to the AI, I want to get back to the, keeping the partners in the discussion, because I have a really great example from my time at the Austin San Antonio office. So Central Texas is known as Flash Flood Alley. We get a lot of flash flood deaths there, mainly folks driving through low water crossings. And so a handful of years ago, the Weather Service made a change to how flash flood warnings WIA. So they made it where flash flood warnings only WIA for considerable or catastrophic tags in those impact-based warnings. Well, we had an IWT with a lot of our Central Texas partners, specifically in the Austin area, which Travis County has a large percentage of those flash flood fatalities. And we went, hey, as a weather service, they've made this change to not WIA these base flash flood warnings. And we posed the question to our partners, what do you think of that? Do you want us to keep WIA-ing things, despite kind of this change was made for the public who thought, hey, why are we WIA-ing things at 2 a.m. when I'm safe in bed? And that's a fair assumption. But as a whole, we had media partners, we had emergency management partners, we had other local meteorologists, and the consensus was, hey, for us, our local impacts are people die when driving through low water crossings. So we want to WIA every time. And so as an office, we made a local policy based on our partners to say, hey, we're just going to issue that considerable basically every single time to ensure that WIA is there. And we made it at the impetus of the local partner. I was heavily involved in that effort, and we came prepared going, do you just want us to leave it how it is for the Weather Service now? We did not want to bias them. We had our thoughts, which was to continue the WIA, but we posed it as, here are all of the options of how we can use flood advisories to flood warnings or the different tags. And it was a resounding, hey, we want the WIA there. So yeah, that just underscores keeping that conversation local with the local partners. For the AI stuff, I think it's a challenge that is something that we're going to have to start tackling. We're using it more as a tool for now. A lot of the severe stuff like Prob Severe, a lot of the algorithms now are becoming more AI based. Warn-On forecast system, the WAFS model, has some AI elements in it. And so I think, I would go out on a limb and say, I don't think the human's ever getting out of the forecasting, at least in the Weather Service, or I don't think we should. Like that, leaving that final decision to me, to Keith, to a warning forecaster and a local WFO, I think is key. But I do see more and more of the tools that we are using at the end of the day, incorporating that AI to say, hey, here's the first guess of there may be a tornado there based on this and that and the other in artificial intelligence, but then leaving it to that forecaster to go, yeah, well, the radar I'm looking at, or going back to RMA, the environment that I'm looking at doesn't really support that, so I'm going to hold off for a scan or something. So at least that's my thoughts there. Keith, anything else to add?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's such an excellent question. I think we're still wrestling with it ourselves as an agency and as a weather enterprise entirely. Is how do we incorporate AI and machine learning while still maintaining the human element, is one aspect. But also the other thing is we've seen a lot of AI tools, machine learning tools being developed in the last 5 to 10 years or so. And the reality is sometimes they're awesome. Like they do such a good job, even out to day 7, day 8. Some of the tools from like Colorado State University, the machine learning tools that they resemble SPC outlooks, right? There are some events they nail, and then a week later, they'll over forecast significantly in a given event. I remember a talk from Russ Schumacher, who's one of the professors who helped develop those products, and he showed within a week of one another. There was one really good one where it improved upon SPC forecast, and then another where it was a big false alarm. I think we see the same thing with a lot of the tools that are being tested in the hazardous weather testbed. Aaron and I both had an opportunity to participate in the spring forecasting experiment this year. Again, there's some that are awesome, some that struggle on a given day, and it's hard to know when they're going to do well and when they're not going to produce guidance that's all that helpful. But the reality is, here in a couple of years, they're going to improve exponentially, improving. It seems like at this point. So yeah, how do we do that? How do we handle that going forward? We've already seen that there are diminishing returns in some aspects of weather service operations, and so we're leaning a little bit more on guidance in general, not AI and machine learning, but guidance in terms of like the national blend of models. I could see more of that happening in the future, but I totally agree with Aaron. It's important still to have that human element to synthesize all the information we're seeing, to distill it for our end users, to make sure we're providing them the information they need so they don't have to kind of wonder, how good is this going to be today? We can provide them that confidence when they need it.
That's great. I'll make a quick comment segue over. I know James, Oklahoma James, has a question too. This is something that I think is an important area that social science can contribute to for our field. We really need to understand from our partners where there is value to be gained and where it's necessary for trust to have that human touch or not. It's important for us to start piloting methods to suss that out. So this isn't something that the social sciences have really tackled head on. I know there was some early work with Fee. You mentioned the like machine learning behind the scenes to do some of the algorithms. Well, they're machine learning based. And in the testing with end users, Chris Karstens, now at SPC, did find that there were times that users said, okay, if you're telling me that this is machine made, that's okay, but I'm not going to trust that nearly as much as something that comes from a human. And the most valuable thing that he added as an attribute in his demonstration system was a little icon that showed if this was machine made completely, if the human had just touched it, or if it was completely human generated. And you could see a step function of trust as it approached human. And part of it was that we were looking at, so emergency managers really, really want that human touch for that. And so similarly, I'm starting to pilot some things now. Working to support NCEP. The national centers are going to be ground zero for this conversation. They're going to be first, I think. You mentioned SPC. That's a very clear area where we'll need to have this conversation. But also in aviation, Weather Prediction Center puts out some products. They're interested in learning. Hey, could we automate one of the just one of the fields that's on one of our products, because we spend tons of man hours tweaking isobars. Do you even look at that? I mean, there could be enormous positive gains from automating some of these things if the user doesn't really care. If it's just background that they can't make a distinction between a human and a machine, and that's not what they're making their decisions on in the product. We can think of products as having these multiple layers of information, which they do. What is it that's important for a human to actually be putting into that can be nuanced. So I'm hoping that we can develop something to start giving us this internal guidance. And I appreciate your views on that, guys. And I'm sorry, James, I have so belabored this point and drawn out this conversation, but you have some great questions too. So I pass the baton over to you.
No, that's a really cool discussion. And I'd put in chat just asking about AI, and we need to figure out where it fits. But has anybody figured out where it fits anywhere? Entertainment, academia, applied science, medical science. It runs the gamut. But my original question, Aaron, you kind of prompted it when you said this is an opportunity for somebody to feel their value if they're not in a busy office. And that reminds me of that, I guess it's Theory Y school of management, where people feel their value by understanding that their gifts and talents and skills are helping the organization get better and to accomplish something. And I think that really resonated. I think that's really awesome. I'm sure there's some of that happens in the local office that's issuing the warning, but this is a neat opportunity to kind of spread that out a little bit. Has that been consistent feedback from the remote mesoscale?
Yeah, and really from all the mutual aids, and I mean, you hit on it. Within the local office that exists too. I know where I was primarily one of the radar and social media people at my office, where other people's strengths were the flash flooding or the partner briefing kind of things. And yeah, so that goes on at the local level. But right, this is really about expanding that to the national level and letting people, give their strengths. And so we get a lot of that feedback, both from those who are volunteering saying, hey, this was really cool. Kind of like Keith's anecdote of, hey, I'm helping that downstream office from where the tornado is now, and getting that kind of pride of saying, hey, I helped out in this big event, even though I'm offices and offices away. Or the local office going, hey, we, really appreciate that extra expertise on that local expertise that we're bringing to it. So yeah, it's been a lot of good positive feedback there. Keith, did you have any other things to add?
No, just to follow on from James's point there. It's I think a lot of what we do in our operations it becomes part of our identity, and just feeling that appreciation for what we're doing, and like you said, the skills that we bring to the table is sometimes it can be it goes beyond like weeks and weeks or months of just our day-to-day operation, just one of that helping out another office. Like in December, this past December, so a couple of years after the 2021 event, I helped out with another event. This one was in primarily the Nashville County warning area. And as we were talking about early on, I lived in Tennessee when I was a kid, from ages of 5 to 18. Essentially, I knew all of these communities, the locations that were being affected by these storms, and just being there and providing that little, as Aaron was saying, tap on the shoulder and helping them as they were going through the warning operations, helping them provide a little bit of extra lead time to the Nashville metro area so they could prepare for what ended up being a tornadic supercell going through the area. And then hearing from the meteorologist in charge, like the day after the event, we're certain that your actions last night helped save lives. I mean, that really gets to you. And it's those emotions, I think, that really push you forward, and just that feeling that you did something to make a difference, which is why most of us got in the weather service in the first place. It just really reinforces your passion for what you're doing in those instances. And I think that is largely positive. I'll say the one thing that we're kind of in the process of, or we're getting to a risky place in the sense that people are kind of getting burned out by it. And that's what we want to try to avoid. And that's why we're getting all these mutual aid initiative leaders together to try to brainstorm and figure out how are we going to really codify this as part of NWS operations in the future, rather than just relying on comp time and overtime or volunteering, because we don't want people's passions to lead to burnout.
This is a really passionate thing too, and I think you're hitting on that with the service mentality that everybody in the agency seems to have. But when you get into a disagreement about the evolution of a storm, when you're nudging along one way, the warning forecaster at the local office is thinking another way, conflict's kind of inevitable there. How do you handle that in that immense pressure point?
Yeah, I'll just chime in briefly, Aaron, since it's kind of on the RMA side, but feel free to chime in. Ultimately, your role is not to make the decision for the local office. It's not to question their decisions either. It's really to just provide guidance, provide insight, to try to assist them as they absorb all of the information that can be considered in that warning process. They're going to have a lot more information than we do. They're going to probably have some reports from spotters or local media that we may not have. We're usually in their NWS chat, their Slack rooms, so we get a sense of what they're communicating to their partners, but we're not in the room with them, so we don't have all of the same information. But ultimately, it's up to them. They have the local knowledge. They know what their partners need. They know what their public needs, and they may be more familiar with some of the evolutions than we might be if we're working in another part of the country. So ultimately, they have the final decision, and we're just kind of there as additional guidance in those situations.
Yeah, Savvy works the same way. We are helping them find reports, whether it's an ongoing weather event of, hey, this picture of a tornado was tweeted 5 seconds ago, or hey, here's a picture that someone tweeted from 20 minutes ago of that tornado warning, helping verify them. But if it's a now, kind of a nowcast type report, we're not in the chat going, hey, here's this issue, this warning now. It's just handing them that information and letting them make the decision. And going back to the kind of convective warning discussion and mutual aid there that Kim had brought up, that Keith was talking about, that's actually a key point of kind of the next step of that, is they are going to try several different ways of how that communication works. How is that going to work best? Is it a chat, where it's just text back and forth? Is it, a visual, kind of like we are on camera with each other? Is it just somebody in your ear? What does happen? What types of communication styles does that take, to make that type of effort go as smoothly as possible? Because there will always be disagreements there, but at least in our kind of mutual aid goal, it's just to provide that additional support and that additional information, and letting that warning forecaster, letting that local office make their ultimate decisions there.
We had Dr. Cameron Nixon on last week, and it sounds like this is a human behavior definition of being a nudger. That's fascinating. All yours, Troy.
Pardon my voice, by the way, laryngitis here, so just letting you know. But
you celebrated the SEC thing. That's what's going on.
I know. Aaron and I have to tell you what a great guy Aaron is. He very much involved in the community and outreach and that sort of thing. And I can't think of anyone that I'd rather have in that position, Aaron, where you are. And as I told you the day you went up there, I said, congratulations. We need that. And I say that to you. But Aaron also knows that I'm a pain in the rear end. And I have questions that I like to bring up, and I want to throw it to Keith and to Aaron. And Aaron, I know you and I've probably visited on this in the past. Back in January, I think it's the 5th of January in 2010, we went up from 3/4 inch to 1 inch on the severe criteria. And the reason to do that, we were told, was to reduce the number of SVRs, severe thunderstorm warnings. I wonder if either one of you have an idea about how the total number of SVRs in 2009, I'm just going in there for the full year before 2010, compared to the number of severe thunderstorm warnings in 2023 last year. Because I contend that there are more now. I'm suggesting maybe we need to go to 1.25 inches. We need to get these warnings down. People, and Keith mentioned it. When he mentioned it, I thought maybe he was talking about the public to some degree. I believe the public is burned out over severe thunderstorm warnings. And I think we have to look at that. And I'll let you talk.
Yeah, just to start out, I happen to pull up the warning numbers from back. This starts in 2008. Had about, well, we had 16,692 according to the table I'm looking at that we've developed here last year. And this is, well, sorry, this is year to date. This was made a couple of days ago. So yeah, almost 17,000 through June 27th. Last year is about 12,000 through June 27th. But 2008 was a little bit of an outlier. Like 2009 was just under 13,000. 2010 was 10 to 11,000. So yeah, it varies from year to year.
Right.
Overall, I'd have to look at a longer trend.
Year, Keith, I'll give you credit. This year has been a bad year. So we'll look at that number and understand that. But I don't think the public really understands a severe thunderstorm warning all that much. Although I will tell you, I think the National Weather Service has done a great job. And even at SPC at pointing out what the threats are now in a warning. Which is the biggest thing or so forth. And there have been some pitfalls along the way in that one. But bottom line, I think the Weather Service has done a really good job with the formatting of the warnings to point out what those primary threats are and the tags associated with them. It's a little confusing, but we go there. And I think I interrupted you, Keith. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I was just going to say, yeah, generally speaking, on average, year to year, and again, this is year to date through basically the end of June, roughly 9,000 to 13,000 on an average year. So yeah, I understand. I'd have to look at a longer trend line to get a sense of if that really made a difference. But yeah, the bottom line is there are a lot of warnings. I think there's some social science research out there. A study by Kenzie Krochak comes to mind where she was looking at severe thunderstorm warnings with different hazards across different parts of the country and trying to get a sense of what the public thought went into a severe thunderstorm warning, what the hazards actually were, whether it was hail, damaging winds, they included lightning, they included heavy rain. And if you looked at places like Florida, I think they, just based on the calls to action that are used a lot by those weather forecast offices, they thought heavy rain was a component that goes into severe thunderstorms. They thought that lightning, cloud to ground lightning, was a component. And those two things are not considered for severe thunderstorm warnings, of course. So we are working weekly, daily with social scientists to try to develop a different project to look at these different types of questions. So we work with Kim, like I mentioned before. We work with Danielle Nagel, who's a social scientist within our office in national headquarters. And she was the previous severe weather program manager, actually. So she's intimately familiar with what we're doing here in the program. But it doesn't matter how good our warnings are if the people aren't understanding them, is ultimately what it comes down to. So we work hand in hand with them to try to do everything we can to ensure that the end users are getting the information they need and can take action on it.
Aaron, I'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on the point that I was going to make, which I think when we added the IBW tags to the severe thunderstorm warnings, I think that was kind of the first step in that direction of being able to communicate, that larger hail in that severe thunderstorm warning. Because, right, a severe thunderstorm warning before that was a severe thunderstorm warning, whether it was the base 16 1 inch or whether we're saying there's softball size hail and it's a 100-mile-an-hour wind, severe for a derecho. It was still just a severe. And so I do think adding the two tags there was a really good part in that. And to hit on something that Keith hit on, I do think that there is some geographic kind of differences there. I'm thinking back to our beloved Austin and the March 25th hail jinx of how, for some reason, it just seems like a lot of March 25th, Austin gets hit by a bunch of hail. So they, our area, I think, is kind of primed for that larger hail at times in the spring. But to kind of close, I think it does go back more to the understanding of the warning and the context that whether it's the weather service, whether it's the local media can give around the events of like, hey, this is not your typical springtime severe weather event. This is something different. This is an event that's going to hit at rush hour versus, overnight versus whenever. So I think that context is important too.
Well, and I've got one more for you, and I know Aaron and I have visited on this, and this is a hill I'm going to die on. I'm that old, so I will die on that hill with this one. I loved what Keith said a couple of minutes ago, and folks, bottom line is this: I spent last week, Kim and I both did, a time at the Aviation Weather Center up in Kansas City last week, and it was amazing to watch. But the true treasure of the National Weather Service is its people. It is the people. It is the forecasters. Those people working 122 WFOs, the 9 national centers that we have, and everything else. Those are the people. So I realize, and Keith's going to laugh at this. I know he will. But the text era is over with. But that'll never completely leave Troy. I have yet to understand. I sat down with Louis on this years ago, and I will sit down with Ken on this coming up at some point. But I have never understood in paragraph or asterisk number 3 of the SVR's tornado warnings / flood warnings, which is basically in an AWIPS formatter. It's there. I mean, that's how quick you need to get them out. It's in that formatter. Why years ago we dropped that asterisk 3 from reading at 7:23 National Weather Service meteorologists detect. We sit there and put at 7:23 severe thunderstorms are indicated near wherever. Folks, those crawls are crawling on the Weather Channel. They're crawling on every local TV station for the most part. Give credit to the people hitting the warning. It's not a radar that issues that warning, and it's not some mysterious. It's your people. That's where your money is. That's where your talent is. And why we can't put that in the AWIPS formatter in asterisk number 3 is beyond me. If I became Ken tomorrow, I'd walk in that office tomorrow morning and say, this happens today. And if you can't make it happen today, then I'll find somebody who can. Because you got to give the credit to the people out there that do it. And it's your local people. It is just as Keith said, the people do it. And why we can't change that in the AWIPS formatter for warnings, beyond me. Please make that happen.
Oh, I mean, I can't echo you more there that it's the people. And, going back to this busy May, Keith and I are working on an article for our kind of internal newsletter within the Weather Service, basically thanking everybody because it was the busiest May basically since 2011 in terms of severe weather. And it all goes back to the people and the long hours that it works. Yeah. But it's not just. And
something too, Aaron, and Kim's on the line, and I want to see what she had for dinner anyway. Bottom line, but it seems to me that warning from a social science standpoint would mean more to John or Jim Jones out there if they realize, hey, a National Weather Service meteorologist see it, rather than not identifying who is actually issuing that warning in that crawl. I think it would make a difference. It's just like storm reports. Aaron knows this. I stay on the WFOs. About, give me law enforcement reports, Austin Police Report 1-inch hail. That means something to people. When you give them an exact location and law enforcement or a spotter reporting, it gets people's attention. I would contend National Weather Service meteorologists are detecting a tornado at this location would appeal more to people and maybe get a better reaction.
I mean, I would have to agree with you because, there are times where I will talk to my girlfriend's family or somebody, and that goes, what do you do for a living? You're a meteorologist. And of course, the first thing they go to is, oh, you're on TV. And when I go, no, I work for the National Weather Service, they go, well, what do you do? And it's like, I go, well, I issue, I'm the one who has issued the warnings in the past. And they are, kind of shocked and they don't realize, I think, that they're right. It does come from a human. And I think that the Weather Service is doing better in that through a lot of our impact-based decision support that we're giving, not just to the emergency managers and helping them, circling back to Kim's point, letting them know that there's still that human element there, but also on social media. That was one of the things I was very passionate about is communicating very constantly through social media, letting them know they're right. This isn't just some automated weather account that you're getting information from on Twitter. There's a person here, and I'm the one looking at the radar too. My fellow meteorologist across the room is the one issuing the warning. And right, there is that human element there. And it does. It goes a long way above and beyond the warning. I will never forget that it was the May 2002 event where the tornadoes went through I-35 there in Austin and Round Rock, Troy. The night before, I was working a quiet Q shift, a quiet evening shift, and me and Andrew Quigley were working the desk, and we realized the storms were going to come through at rush hour the next night. And so we made a concerted effort via NWS chat to involve all of our media partners saying, we're about to start pushing this messaging that these storms are coming through between 4 and 6, and have a plan and be ready. Do not be stuck on I-35. And we heard after the event that there were people who did not get a lot of lead time on the warnings, but went, hey, I remember the local TV guy saying that it was going to be at rush hour. And so I stayed at work, or I went home early. And that to me will always be a testament of it's not just the warnings that we put out. It's that IDSS, it's the messaging via social media, it's those personal connections. And right, any way that we can tie that back and give thanks to the forecaster, I think is key.
I appreciate it, Keith and Aaron, both. Thanks.
Okay, Aaron and Keith, let's talk for a minute about the warning program itself. Some people would say it's become stagnant, that FARs are too high and PODs are dropping. Address those issues just from a number standpoint for us, and then let's talk about what you see the problem is and how the plans are evolving to help improve those statistics. Who wants to go first?
I vote Keith.
And here's where you can utilize your my internet isn't working flag if it gets too hot in here. But we're all friends here, and we all have the same goals, and so let's look at that, because we look at it frequently and we want to hear your expert opinion.
I like Aaron, by the way. Aaron, good job. Okay.
Hey, I just answered.
Sorry, Keith.
I answered Troy's question. I figured it was time to hand it back.
Yeah,
to Keith.
the tennis match. It's your turn, Keith.
Yeah. No, understood. Thanks, Aaron. But no, I mean, if you look back at the stats over the last 15 years or so, kind of going back to that 2008 benchmark, and we're using 2008 because that's when we went from the county-based to storm-based warnings. Our POD overall has been somewhat consistent, and it's been sitting around 60% or so. Our false alarm rate has been pretty consistent, around 70% or so. I mean, there's not really much getting around that. Those are the stats. Lead times 9 or 10 minutes. But when you look at the most impactful tornadoes, so the ones that are contributing to 90 to 100% of fatalities, depending on the year, the EF2 to EF5 tornadoes, those, our probability of detection has consistently been quite a bit higher. Lead time has consistently been quite a bit higher as well. So on an impact-based basis, we're doing really well. The weaker tornadoes, the EF0s, the EF1s, we would like to get those as well, but we recognize that it's not, meteorology is still not perfect science. We can't see everything. Some of these weak tornadoes, they develop and are gone within the span of just a couple of minutes. But that doesn't stop us from trying, right? In the severe program, our aim is to always look back at these events, especially when we have, say, a missed tornado that impacts folks or causes injuries or whatever. We immediately follow up and want to get a sense of what happened in those events. We go back and sometimes conduct after-action reviews or service assessments, and we individually, Aaron and I will go back and look at these things in the severe program to try to get a sense of, okay, what was going on here? Let's get all the facts. Let's get all the feedback from the offices that were affected and try to incorporate this in our training programs going forward? Was it a lack of confidence overall? Was it some training program or topic that didn't quite make it to the local office? Things like that. Because ultimately we want to take all of these experiences where things didn't quite go as intended or as planned or as hoped, and turn them into opportunities to provide better service in the future. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. I think anyone who's worked in the National Weather Service has had false alarms and has had missed tornadoes most likely. And, having been on that side of it as well, having had a tornado that's been missed by a warning when I've been on that radar desk, it's devastating, and that sticks with you for a really long time. So you want to go back and get a sense of what went wrong as well, so that you can improve in the future. As we talked about earlier, we're all very passionate about what we do. We want to keep people safe, and we don't want to have any events where people get caught off guard. And so we're doing what we can in the SEVERE program to ensure that we get better as every day goes by. And we think some of the initiatives we talked about earlier, once they work their way into operations like threats in motion, will help with that. But ultimately, we're doing what we can in the meantime to ensure we're doing better every year as best we can. So Aaron, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, to pull a little bit more numbers, and Keith alluded to these. Both he and I are numbers men, and so we dig into these. Going back to 2008, looking at just those EF2s through 5s, we have an 83% POD with an average lead time of 15 minutes, which is right around kind of the recommended 13 to 15 minutes there. And again, to Keith's point, these EF2s through 5s have killed 92% of the tornado or make up 92% of the tornado related fatalities, again, going back to 2008. So when it counts, we are doing really well. And that's yet another thing that we really are pushing out to the field, because I do think, there are areas that we need to tackle, and things like after action reports, really going back and revisiting those events, especially for those weaker tornadoes, as we learn more and how to warn more efficiently, really looking at the environment, being ready for those quick spin ups, working towards the future of radar, and hopefully getting, whether it's more coverage or faster coverage, being able to detect them better, taking some of these steps, still going, hey, we have a lot to celebrate here when it comes to these higher end tornadoes, as a whole. And the kind of overall stats are deceiving because there are fewer of these EF2s through 5s. And so the more frequent EF0s and 1s are really what pull that stat down at the end of the day. And so we've started to really differentiate those two stats as much as we can when we're talking to the field, when we're talking to our leadership, and even to Congress and others of, hey, when it matters, we're really good, and we're working on these other areas, through things like threats in motion, through a lot of R2O, research to operation stuff, through community-centric warnings, because I think a lot of it, too, comes back to how we communicate the hazards. The narrative I just shared with Troy about the communication ahead of the event, lead time is no longer 5 minutes or 15 minutes. It is now on the order of hours to the watch, to days to the convective outlook. When SPC is putting these 15 and 30%, outlooks on day 6 and 7 now, these people are not, yes, the warning is that, immediate action, the tornado or the flash flood or the severe thunderstorm is there, but they've now had 7 days of the media and the Weather Service and their emergency management partners talking about this severe weather risk. And so that is a lot of the things that we hear from the field, is this expanding lead time where, yes, we have these GIPRA goals, we have these measures that are built off the warning, but there's so much communication, and I'm just giving Kim a softball here, so much communication going on ahead of time now that true lead times are now measured in hours to days and not just these minutes.
Yeah, and I was going to quickly add something there, Aaron, too, because you mentioned R2O. And I think what's become apparent here in the last several years, I'd say the last 10 years or so, is the environments that give us the biggest challenges, the most headaches, that includes, environments that support quasi-linear convective systems or squall lines, which represent lower probability of detection and a higher false alarm rate, lower lead times for tornadoes. Things like high shear low cape environments, like in the southeastern U.S., that contribute to a majority of the nocturnal and the cool season tornadoes that can be really impactful down there in that part of the country. Those environments are now getting a lot of attention when it comes to research and to field projects. And so as all of these research findings come out, and we start to incorporate those into our operations, which is why that research to operations and then also the service piece is so important. I see our POD increasing, our FAR decreasing, our lead time increasing for all tornadoes. So we're going to continue to do really well with those EF2s to 5s, but we're also going to raise up our performance in the EF0s and EF1s as this research becomes reality and we get it into our operations. So I just wanted to make that note since you brought it up, Aaron.
Take us behind the scenes for a minute, because last Tuesday night I was watching the radar in western Nebraska, and there was a supercell there. The environmental conditions are, of course, high K, very low helicity, but what appeared to be pretty clearly a tornado was developing, and no warning was issued for several minutes. And I know that the local office, the EMs were asking about it, and the forecaster was, obviously, trying to decide whether to pull the trigger or not. What happened behind that scene that you can share with us? Because the little town of Whitman, Nebraska did get hit. And I don't know what the rating was, or I know there was one injury, but it did seem that it was a missed opportunity 10 or so minutes before. So comment on that. Was it a tempest in a teapot, or, an opportunity to get better, down the road?
Yeah, we're actually still learning, a lot of those answers. So, we are working right now with the NWS Central Region, and going back to what Keith was saying, and a lot of that, kind of post-event analysis that offices do, that regions do for both successful and non-successful events. We spin up after action reports and talk about the best practices, the things that went right, the things that went wrong, because we are always trying to improve even when we hit it out of the park. So Central Region has spun up an after action review concerning that event specifically, and just kind of figuring out what science-based happens and what we can learn from that. So that is still something that is just in the beginning stages. And we don't have a lot of those answers, but really that is the point of these AARs, is to learn a lot of that that goes on. Because again, at the end of the day, holistically, we're doing very well. But we're always going to have these other events that pop up as well.
Talk about
sorry.
Go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to say, going back to football, it's kind of easy to play Monday morning quarterback, I guess, in those situations. And like Aaron said, their Central Region spinning up their after action review. Having been in that situation and being in NWS operations, there could be a lot of things taking your attention, and we just kind of need to figure out all the facts, figure out what was really going on before we move forward. To your point, it was an EF3 tornado. It was unwarned. Those are the facts and situations. Somebody was injured, and so we need to take this as an opportunity to get better, as Aaron was saying. And it's hard because I feel like sometimes there's this fear of failure, and when something goes wrong, you just have that stick with you, and it sticks with you as a failure versus seeing it as an opportunity to make progress and move forward. And I think that's kind of where we have to shift the mentality, is looking forward and seeing what we can do in the future to prevent that from happening again.
Well, I'm just going to say we got to have you guys back a lot in the future if you want to go through this torture again, because I still have so many questions, and I know everyone else does too. I'll ask one more, and then I know we'll ask a few after the break here coming up. But Birmingham did a really good job several years ago, continues to do a good job. We see inconsistency between the offices. Are there any initiatives, efforts? I know if Kevin Laws is involved, there probably is, but that help offices that are maybe lagging a little bit for whatever reason improve their warning strategies, and improve their statistics. Comment on that. And then James can take us to the break. We got special guest Bruce Thomas with us tonight. We'll come back and talk to him right after the break for a minute. So Bruce, hang on just a minute. We're just having a great time here. We'll answer that, and then James can take us to the break. Who wants to go first?
I'll take a swing at it, and then I'll pivot to Keith. There's a lot of things going on across the board. I think, that a lot of opportunities that we like to give the offices, from things like, Keith was very instrumental in our spring severe weather program meeting, where I think for the first time we opened it up to focal points and meteorologists from the local offices, rather than just local managers and regional folk, of, hey, bring these conversations to us. We're going to share what we're doing in the severe program. SPC is going to talk, but we really encouraged a lot of that communication, and we found out a lot of different things about a lot of the differences of how offices use GR as a supplement to our AWIPs, as how different offices communicate via chat, and these differences. And that allows Keith and me and Kevin and us as a severe program to go back to the drawing board and create training and create initiatives that really do raise the bar across the board. And one of those that Kevin has been involved in from the beginning actually involves our post-storm data assessment, to really get a consistent, rating across the board from office to office. Because you have offices that don't get a lot of tornadoes, and you get offices like Birmingham that do. And so, we have the EF scale, we have the damage indicators. But hey, there are areas where we need more training. There are areas where, we are looking into a lot more cloud-based and a lot more hands-on type training, so that offices that don't get that much severe weather can very easily get that practice and have that at their fingertips. So going back to that quiet weather day, if a forecaster wants to practice on an event and put Birmingham's tornadoes over, I don't know, the WFO in New York or something, that something like that is actually possible, that they can use these things as training initiatives. So we have a lot of things like that, and we really encourage, this goes back to Keith's point of, we want to see all of these events as ways that we can improve, that these are not negative narratives, that we are there to support the field and continue to bring them up and continue to have their back through all of these different initiatives. So I know that this has really been a topic that Keith and I have talked about, so I'm sure you have more to add there, Keith.
Yeah, I'll just be brief here because I know we're going to break, but training happens at a lot of different levels in the National Weather Service. You have the national level training through the Warning Decision Training Branch, or Training Division, sorry. They changed their name several years ago. I don't know why I used that. But they handle the national training. They handle the radar applications course, which all of the new meteorologists go through. And that's being updated every year with new materials. So sometimes the newest meteorologists in the agency may actually have the latest and greatest information, and they can share that with their local office when they come back, which is really cool. They also have the warning operations course, which is kind of a refresher course for the folks who haven't been at the radar applications course for a while. But then you have regional teams of subject matter experts. You have science and operations officers at those local offices. So there's a lot of different layers of training that are going on. And one thing that Aaron and I are working on is, in the coming months, we want to get training summits together through the severe program, where we bring together the folks from WDTD and the science and operations officers and these regional subject matter expert cadres, and just get everyone in the same room, start to talk about ideas, try to envision a future planning, a training plan for the agency on the whole, and see where collectively we decide to go from here. There's certainly different levels of expertise and skills when it comes to warnings. Ideally, we'd be providing the best service every time, like we talked about before. So how do we raise everyone up to some baseline level and ensure we're providing consistent quality service? I think that's a fair question, and something that Aaron and I want to figure out here through the Sphere program.
So I'm the troublemaker here, and I know we got to go to break. We got to go to break. I understand that, but this has been a great discussion. But so you said that the POD across the Weather Service is about 60, the FAR is about 70. So 7 out of 10 tornado warnings are false alarms. Is that acceptable, you think?
Aaron, do you want to take that?
Crickets.
You want me to take it?
Crickets.
If you want to go for it.
They said something about break, I think, James.
Oh, we could talk about this.
By the way, I like that, Keith. Way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly talked about it internally, and it's hard to say. I'll say based on the research, right? And this is with supercell tornadoes. I have a couple of good friends who do a lot of research on supercell tornadoes and look at simulations of them. If you look at an ensemble of supercell tornadoes in a high resolution model that use a sounding that was based on a tornadic environment, then you have an ensemble of simulated supercells based on a non-tornadic sounding. Throw those in there. They're so subtly different, both in terms of environment and then in terms of the storm characteristics, that it's a challenge. It's as we talked about before. It's not an exact science. Whether or not 70% is acceptable, I'm not going to necessarily put my opinion in on that. But ultimately, going back to what we talked about with the most significant tornadoes, we're doing a good job. We are hitting those with high POD, high lead times in terms of 15, 16 minutes. So if you look at it in an impact-based approach, where these tornadoes that are causing the most significant impacts, are we warning effectively on those? I think we are.
And real quickly, to go back to a point that Keith made earlier, especially about those low-end EF zeros and ones, and as R2O, and as we learn more, we're going to improve across the board. FAR is actually, of those three stats, POD, FAR, and lead time, the one that we're seeing improvement across the board. You can't really split up FAR because there was a tornado or not, so you're not going to be able to easily figure out where that's dragging it down. But we're actually seeing improvement in that stat across the board over the last 5 to 10 years from where it was. So we are already seeing those benefits of the new science in it too.
Okay. Now again, and listen, I'm the guy that hangs out at the Walmart and the Dollar General, and I'm down here getting a Hunt Brothers pizza at the Shell gas station with real people. And I still hear it. I hear these warnings all the time, and nothing ever happens. And I know that Kim's a social scientist, and I know it's all about the numbers, but just as a goober from the Deep South down here, I hear that a lot. And it's just one of the issues that we fight. It's hyperbole. And people are bombarded with the TikTokers and the YouTubers. Everything's the worst ever. Everything. And they do that to get the clicks. And I know that's got nothing to do with the professional weather enterprise. But if we're rolling out false alarms at that rate, to me, it's problematic. And I think we can do better. And I think there's some things we just can't do. We can't issue a tornado warning for a tornado in a QLCS that's down for 2 minutes. By the time the warning goes out, the dissemination process is finished. It's gone. So what good is it? It is so. And I'm worried that the metric of success is the number of warnings issued. And I just don't think that's right. But having said that, I'm glad you guys you're thinking this all through. And I know we're going to get better. We're all going to get better, and we all want to do the same thing. And I've got a million more questions, but Bill Murray, we have to pause because we have to take a break. If not, we're going to be here until midnight. So we're going to take a quick break and hear from Tony Rice and his astronomy report. Again, Jen is out this week, so we're not going to have her segment or an email segment this week. But Bill, when we're through with Tony, I'll let you pick it up with Bruce. So much more to go, including a look at the hurricane as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The Earth reaches aphelion early Friday morning, its furthest point from the sun. This comes from the Greek words apo, meaning away, and helios, meaning sun. We're about 3 million miles further from the sun than we will be at perihelion, the closest point, in January. Does this make sense? As we enter the summer months and parts of the country are already topping 100 degrees. Well, 3 million miles might sound like a lot, but Earth's orbit, it's nearly but not quite circular. Distance to the sun really doesn't change all that much, only about 3%. Summer temperatures increase as the Earth is more tilted towards the sun, and we receive those rays more directly. Right now in the southern hemisphere, they're receiving more indirect sunlight, and that causes cooler temperatures. The varying amounts of land mass in the northern and southern hemispheres, they also account for some of that temperature difference because the oceans are particularly good at storing heat, but that's for another week. That varying distance from the sun, it does have an impact on the seasons, specifically their length, and Earth's changing orbital velocity is the cause. You see, northern summers, they're longer because they occur near aphelion, when the Earth is moving more slowly around the sun. It's moving faster around perihelion, and that subtracts nearly a week from the summer down under. Elsewhere in the sky, the planets are slowly becoming more visible after a few weeks of being hidden below the horizon or below the tree line. Look for Mars and Jupiter just a few degrees away from the pre-dawn crescent moon early this week. It's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Well, we're very lucky tonight to have our old friend, Bruce Thomas. Bruce, we haven't spoken to you in a long time, and I'm sorry we kept you so long, but there in the green room, I hope you enjoyed some of the green M&Ms over there that we save for all of our WeatherBrains guests. And it's nice to talk to you. How are you tonight, and what have you been up to lately?
Well, Bill, it's great to be on WeatherBrains again. You know, at one point, I think I was the person who'd been on the most times in many, many years past. And it's nice to be here with you guys. Enjoying the conversation tonight, listening to Aaron and Keith talk about the forecasting and warning process. And that's what I'm doing now. You know, I spent a large part of my career warning people for severe weather. That's really been my passion. And NOAA Weather Radio was a big part of my history in this business. And I've moved on now working with Weather Call Services as Senior Vice President. And we are a company that delivers polygonal warnings on your phone and to your businesses. And we do a lot of enterprise business with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. We have a tremendous network of customers that use our services for anything from cruise ships to RV parks to some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world use us to geofence their manufacturing plants. And we deliver information to the top management via text, email, and disruptive phone call as needed when their facility falls into a polygonal warning. So it's very specific, much more than a county-wide warning. It's a very specific warning. And when you get a call from Weather Call, you need to take notice.
So Bruce, we've really enjoyed the commercial that you've given us this year. Anytime you can work James Bannon into a commercial, we always like it. But you know, and I guess, is that Gene Norman's voice that we heard on the commercial? Did he cut it, or was it another voice?
It was Gene Norman. He wrote it, produced it, because he actually worked in the Birmingham market, knows James from those years when he worked in Birmingham, and he actually wrote it and produced it, and I thought he did a great job of voicing it. But there's many people that have recognized his voice. When we were at the AMS convention, I was out there with Troy in Myrtle Beach recently, and several people said, was that Gene Norman's voice? I said, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it sure was good to hear his voice. So you talked about some of the other verticals that you're kind of getting into, Bruce, and you mentioned some of those innovations. You've got some products that have physical alarm capabilities, right? Like their own device that hardware that can sound a warning directly. Talk about that for a second.
Right, our hazard alarm box, which is made for like swimming pools, made for playgrounds, splash pads, or small area warning device. It's cellular warned, and it's polygonal specific, and it's not very expensive for small area warnings. And we like to say that we have that ability to warn people for lightning, severe thunderstorm, and tornado with this device. And they're manufactured in Oklahoma. They're designed and manufactured in Oklahoma. A lot of the Native American tribes are now using them in small area warning. It has like a 500 feet range. You can add speakers and get it up to a quarter of a mile, but larger speakers. But it just plugs into 110 power, and automatically locks onto the cell network. And the way it was designed, it's plug and play. So say you have a neighborhood swimming pool, and there's no lifeguard or anybody there. You basically mount it on the wall and plug it in, and it activates whenever lightning comes within 10 miles, and then it turns off basically once it's out of range. And it'll do the same for a tornado warning and severe thunderstorm warning, and has a siren also. And it's just a very specific device that we've manufactured and developed, and it's developed by a company called Tektrol in Oklahoma, but it's warned by WeatherCall. So we actually are the company that provides the warnings, and those warnings come from the National Weather Service or from the Lightning Network, and very specific, and it's very inexpensive. It's $35 a month for one of these devices to be activated and used at your neighborhood swimming pool. So we hope that it'll save a lot of lives from needless lightning deaths and keep people advised. The warnings are straight from the Weather Service, but we pass that through using the cell network. It's not radio fed like a weather radio. It's fed through the cell network.
And Aaron can probably jump in here as one of the lightning leads for the Weather Service. Aaron, how are we doing this year on lightning fatalities in the U.S.? Do you have any updated statistics on where we are?
I believe we have just had our sixth lightning fatality. Yes, as of this afternoon, we're up to 6. But I've actually seen several other articles talking about injuries over the last couple of weeks, and we're here, in summertime, which is typically our busiest period, because everybody's out and about at the beach, out at sports things, and that's when we get the pop-up thunderstorms across the southeast and east. So it is kind of that time of year for see a flash dash inside and when thunder roars go indoors. But yeah, we're up to 6, which is based on kind of the last several years about where we have been, for the beginning of July. But I would say the important thing is that we've seen, especially over the last 5 years, a massive reduction compared to 10 and 15 years ago. We've gone from an average of about 40 fatalities a year in the U.S. to somewhere around 20 over the last couple of years. So the education that the Weather Service and the media partners and all of the local both private enterprises and things from beaches to pools to everybody that they're doing to take lightning safety seriously is having an effect, and that's a really great thing to see.
That's great. Well, Bruce, talk about your business or your B2C product, which has been around a long time and is really appreciated. Talk about its cost and what kind of plans people can get into to be a part of it.
We call it WeatherCall Next Gen. It's the next generation of the WeatherCall services product that's available on your smartphone. It's available on both the Android and iOS, and it's $1 a month. It's $12 a year. Wow. And if you want the lightning option added, it's $3 more. Then it's $15 a year. And it gives you 2 lines. So if you have a home phone, it still will call you on your landline, or you can register 2 different mobile devices for, say, a spouse, 2 people, or your mother-in-law, or whomever you'd like to put on that call. But you get text warning, email warning. We send out information when you get under a watch. We send out more information when you get into a warning, a severe thunderstorm warning. We have an extreme severe thunderstorm warning that you can select if you just want to be warned when it's golf ball size scale or larger, taking it off the tags, of course, and if you want 70-mile-an-hour winds or greater. So if you don't want a lower level severe thunderstorm warning, you can opt only to get a higher level one, and we give you a initial phone call when it's radar indicated tornado, and then we give you a second phone call when it's observed. And I actually got to witness all this stuff work at one time. I was in the long track supercell. I'm hearing it's the longest track supercell of this season that went across northern Oklahoma and all of northern Arkansas back on the early morning hours of May 26th. And I saw everything in action, and everything worked beautifully. From the Weather Service putting out a moderate risk earlier in the day, and eventually that storm developing and moving, it killed 2 people in Claremore, Oklahoma. Then it moved across from Delaware County into Benton County, Arkansas, and then it went to work. And I live in Benton County, Arkansas. I live in Rogers, and I was driving damaged areas today, and the huge FEMA supported debris removal companies were just getting to our neighborhood, and they were here picking up the trees today. So it was still quite a disaster area here in the Northwest Arkansas, Benton County exclusively. And I got to witness how the weather call services device worked. NOAA weather radio worked beautifully. I have to give it kudos also. Weather radio worked great. The local TV meteorologist, we work with Dan Scoff at KNWA. He is our partner here. He promotes weather call services here in Northwest Arkansas. He had had some success, and we've had some testimonials that people were warned through that device and through their mobile devices. Also, WEA, the Wireless Emergency Alert System, was activated here. So the National Weather Service in Tulsa did a tremendous job with this system, and it was amazing. We had this tremendous supercell come over us around 1:30 to 1:45 in the morning, created 7 separate tornado tracks just in Benton County, Arkansas. And then one of the ones, the one that started over my neighborhood, went just east of us and became 1.5 miles wide and did EF2 damage all the way through downtown Rogers, Arkansas. So we were out witnessing all that, got out with saws and cutting trees at 2 a.m, clearing roads. And, it's nice to have some ways of being warned. And when I was out in the public, I asked people, I volunteer with the Northwest Arkansas Red Cross. I'm on the disaster action team. So I was out after the storm visiting people in some of the hardest hit areas where they had EF3 damage, and delivering shovels and rakes and garbage bags and leather gloves. Gloves were probably the number one thing people needed. And I asked them, did you get a warning? And many people did. Many people got their warnings on their phones, some on weather radio, and some got phone calls from family telling them. I was asking a gentleman today, and he said, my daughter called me and said, you're in the path of a tornado, Dad. You got to remember, at 1:30 in the morning, an EF3 tornado coming right at you. It's hard sometimes to wake people up. A lot of people don't sleep with their phones. And, there's all these different variables. So we say have multiple ways of getting warned. I still recommend no weather radio. I recommend having a good warning app. I recommend having weather call services for your home phone and for your mobile device. I recommend, having knowledge of your outdoor sirens, but they're not indoor warning devices. But some people were awakened by the sirens if they lived close to them. But having just witnessed this on the early morning hours of May 26th, personally, I want everyone to have as many modalities as you can possibly have to get warned, because we all know nothing is fail-proof, and having multiple ways of getting warned. So weather call services, we have a niche in the market. And so for $1 a month or $1.25 a month, you can have this specialized service for you, and it's polygon specific.
All right, now, Bruce, one last thing. I know James is probably upset at me for going long tonight, but you've got a product on your Weather Call Enterprise, and Kim may be interested in this because I hadn't thought of it till I was looking at your website. You have the ability to plug your system into building fire alarms, and I assume you do that with the support of the fire alarm manufacturer and the people who monitor it. But that could really be a very effective thing in hotels and offices. And I've got to do some research into that because, that's the fastest way to get people's attention. The one downside is, we teach them when there's a fire alarm to go for the exits. And that's not what we want to necessarily do in a tornado warning. We want them to come to the safe place. Does the system differentiate with a different sound if it's one of your warnings versus what the fire alarm usually sounds like?
Well, I don't have all the answers on this, Bill, but we were talking about it today on our company call that a large medical office building has just installed this switch that we put in, but they wanted it for an all clear also. So we did it on two different lines. So one line warns and one line gives an all clear. And I believe it can be used with a voice chip to give an audible warning for the people that are in the building. So it has several different layers, according to how sophisticated your fire warning system is.
Exactly.
But we manufacture that switch, then we support it through Weather Call Services, sending the data to it. And it's been very successful, actually. And we're seeing more and more large companies. You know what's interesting? When I started working with Weather Call Services a year ago, I learned pretty quickly that manufacturers use us so that they don't have to stop manufacturing during a tornado.
Right.
Because if we don't call them, they don't have to stop and take all their employees and put them into safety. But when they get a weather call, they know that they're in that polygon, they are in the warning, and that they better do something quickly. And then we actually on our enterprise accounts give them an all clear phone call as well. And it's mostly automated. Most everything we do is automated, using the National Weather Service wire and satellite. We have redundancy, and we have servers in the cloud. So we have multiple redundant servers so that if something goes down somewhere, we have backup so we can keep the calls coming and keep
well, good. Well, we'll talk more about that system, Bruce, because I think that's got some real legs. We thank you for your support this year. You help us to provide this show, and we love doing it, and that helps keep us on the air. And thank you to you and your company for being a part of that. And I'll turn it back over to James and anything you want to ask Bruce, and any other last things for our final part of the show, James.
Yeah, we got to rush out of here because we're tardy. But it's great to hear Bruce on the show again. Now, real quick, Troy Kimmel, let me throw it over to you. So Beryl, and obviously, we could talk about this all night, but we don't have time for that. So it's going to come across the Yucatan, hit the Southwest Gulf. Where does it go? Does it turn north, coming toward you, Louisiana, Mexico? What happens?
Troy's muted.
Yeah, I get crickets on all my questions. I don't know what it is about my questions. It's always crickets.
No, it's I apologize. I left it muted. I go with the National Weather Service track. It's too early to say at this point. Can we increase our awareness? Yes. The only thing I'd beg you to do in the days to come, if you're along the West Gulf Coast, is have a trusted weather source, National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, your local media people that you know and trust. Those are trusted partners. Avoid social media crap.
So, in other words, Uncle Joe's TikTok forecast page is not a good source.
Unless Uncle Joe's a meteorologist. And I would say even a tropical meteorologist. You don't have, who was it, Bruce? I think we saw a couple of weeks ago. We had, Robbie Berg was there from the National Hurricane Center when we were all at Myrtle Beach. And those are the experts down at the National Hurricane Center. I say, Robbie and that bunch down there, they know what they're doing. I'll trust them. And when they tell me to start hopping, I'll start hopping.
It'll be very interesting to see what the ensembles look like on these OZ runs here when they come back in a little bit, because the global models are really buying into the concept of a weakness in the ridge north of this thing. Question is, what will be left of it once it comes off the Yucatan? There's more questions than answers. And again, for those listening later, we're doing the show here on July 1st, but we got to roll into picks of the week.
One thing too, James, we ought to mention is 2024 has not been a really good predictable year for weather systems. And this system, moved across the Lesser Antilles and then bought his category 5 now. And bottom line is be prepared for surprises. I have a feeling we're going to see more than a few of them this hurricane season.
Are we at 5 strength here?
I thought we were.
Not officially.
Not officially.
I think it's 155. We're at 155.
Yeah. We're close.
But they found a pressure. I mean, it was extrapolated and it'll get adjusted by the Hurricane Center, but 934.1 on that last pass. So still a little bit stronger.
All right, we'll find out here soon. All right, let's do picks of the week. Everybody on the show here, you got to do a pick of the week. So Keith and Aaron, fair warning, we'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. This is something weather related, something that's interesting, useful, cool. And I'm just going to pick the Phil Klotzbach X account, the old Twitter account. He does such a great job of just constantly updating hurricanes, and he puts it in context with history and climatology, and his information is just second to none. We've had him on the show here before, but I just love his X account when we got active situations and anomalous situations like this. So again, that'll be my pick of the week. And by the way, we lost James Adelot to television. He's got to go do Action News, 23 News at 9 o'clock. So he's over on the TV side. Kim, if you're still with us, what you got? Give us a good pick of the week.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the records that fell with the system already, with our B-named storm, is we broke a 2005 record, I believe, for the earliest in the season that a hurricane reached this intensity that far east. And that year is a pretty auspicious year. You mentioned the Hurricane Center. So I'm going to take this all back a little bit to what that year was like. And I'm going to share my pick of the week is going to be one of the last forecast discussions from that hurricane season. They were going through New Year's. I mean, it was December. I remember it being New Year's Eve and still watching them kind of giving some last takes on the hurricane season. And I mean, they were getting punchy. Those are some funny discussions. So I'm going to go back and find one of my favorites and share it as my pick of the week. But I just really hope, I saw 2005 and I just said to myself, oh, I hope this doesn't happen again. I hope it's not another year like that. It got really, really nutty. And so Godspeed to us all.
It was the season that never ended. Yep. Yes, that was nasty. All right, Troy, give us a good pick of the week.
Well, I want to thank the bottom box here at the Brady Bunch tonight. Kim, this last week, most people know about the fact that I'm obsessed with airline history, and the World Airline Historical Society, Airliners International, met this last week in Kansas City, had our annual show out there by the airport. And one thing we did was organize, and this is my pick of the week, the Aviation Weather Center, Jennifer Struzas and the people out there. And I got into the building the first day, and I'm helping Jennifer kind of round up the cats for the people that are on the tour from the airline groups. And I finally kind of broke away from Jennifer and kind of walked down the hall toward the test bed. And sure enough, walked right out into my face. Kim was there, and it was really good, Kim, to see you up in Kansas City. But what a great group of people, the operations people, Jennifer, Jonathan, the people up at the Aviation Weather Center. I have given them pick of the week before. They get it again tonight. Thank you, Jennifer, and everybody.
All right, Bruce Thomas, give us a good pick of the week. I know Bruce has one.
Well, I've been sitting here thinking because I wasn't prepared for that, but it is Independence holiday weekend coming up, and we've seen the beauty of the weather this year, and I just want to thank everybody for what they do in the weather service, and I'm excited to see how this hurricane season is materializing so quickly based on the forecast that was given earlier in April by Klotzbach and by the NOAA Center, both calling for a very intense season. And it looks like they have done a great job. We've already on the sea storm, but these, they have told us it was going to be an active year, and it sure has proven already to start with a bang with Beryl. So I think this is a shout out to the National Hurricane Center. Great work.
Good deal. All right, Bruce, thank you. Okay, Keith, we've stalled long enough. I know you've got something really good because you're really good.
Well, we'll see about that. I'll let you judge on that. But so the AMS Board for Operational Government Meteorologists is what I'm going to talk about this week, and I've been the chair of the board for about a year and a half now. This is my last year on the board, but we're doing a couple of cool interview series right now that I want to make people aware of. The first is just a week-long video series, just like 2 to 3 minute videos on Twitter and YouTube, also our Facebook and LinkedIn pages. But it's a couple of board members. One is a science operations officer in the Weather Service. One works for the 14th Weather Squadron in the Air Force. They just provided short videos for anyone who's interested in applying for jobs in operational government meteorology or hydrology. So just these little short snippets of information as you're getting your resume ready, as you're preparing for job applications and job interviews. You can take a look at those and get some tips and tricks. The other video series I want to bring people's attention to, these are longer form interviews that are on our YouTube page called the Origins series, where I just sit down with folks from traditionally underrepresented groups in meteorology who have found themselves in leadership positions. So I've got a couple of science and operations officers in the Weather Service, also have somebody at the 14th Weather Squadron in the Air Force. Over the last 6 months or so, sat down with them, and you can view all those on YouTube. So it's at AMSBOGM.
Fantastic. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Great picks. We'll put them up on weatherbrains.com. Okay, Aaron, I know you've got something good up your sleeve.
Yeah, thanks, James. I'm going to move away from my severe and go back to tropical. I picked back up Isaac Storm on my recent vacation. I love this book. Being from Texas, the Galveston 1900 hurricane is a really big and really influential weather event. And I also love weather history. So, it's fascinating, the forecast that went into that hurricane, the not so accurate forecast, but, that was 100 years ago without the luxury of the Hurricane Center and all the technology. And so Isaac Klein was there. And as part of my old weather book collection, which I collect old weather books, this is actually a book that he wrote in 1927 on tropical cyclones, and it is part of my collection. So just Isaac Klein and Isaac Storm is my pick of the week.
Outstanding. We'll put these up on weatherbrains.com. And by the way, thanks to you guys for your work. I appreciate what you're doing to help the warning process. Thank you. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, James Spann, I think the indispensable site to me in tropical meteorology is Tropical Tidbits. If you have not gone and some way given, him money, and you're using his products, you really need to do that because, the stuff he's putting out is unbelievable. It's easily accessible, satellite, recon, forecast models, and just in an easy to use format. So if you get a chance, go, help that work over there. Charles Peak will join us next week. He's the chaser for the Weather Channel, and a wonderful guy and a great friend. Jeff Linder, Troy Kimmel got him for us to talk about Houston. Hopefully we're not talking about some flooding disaster at that point, Troy. Hopefully that will not occur. Rick Smith's put together a great show for the 22nd with the new Twisters movie. So get ready for that. That's going to be fun. And then the record for the most moved guest in WeatherBrains history is Sam Lilo, and he will join us for show 967 on the 29th. Is that right, James? 29th?
We'll actually do that one on the 25th.
He's going to get moved again. This
moved
is
again.
Unbelievable. Yes. So it's just gonna further his record even more. And Jim Spann is going to join James Spann on August the 12th. So that will be a fun show. He works with the NOAA Office of Space Weather Observation. So we'll all be very confused that night.
It'll be a confusing night, and this has been a long night, but a great night. I know we've been running long here, but again, this conversation could have kept on going. But if you're new here, we're glad you're here. And if you have a question for us about anything we've talked about, our email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. We're typically live Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. A lot of folks watch us live on YouTube, youtube.com/weatherbrains, but most of you listen. Whether you watch or listen, thank you. And on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Hey, Troy, start letting me know about those aviation shows you go to. I'm really fascinated with aviation too.
Yeah,
I'd love
this
to
one,
go to a couple of those.
it came real quick after the Bruce and I were at Myrtle Beach, so I'm wonder why I'm got laryngitis, but it was really a lot of fun. Got a bunch of
Don't
cool
blame
pictures.
me.
Yeah.
Keith and Aaron, thank y'all. You guys were great. This was a great show.
Yeah, it really
Thanks,
was
guys.
great. You guys are super. Come back soon.
We'll do.
Absolutely.
Hey, guys, before I sign off.
Hello?
Oh, Bruce.
We lost
did you guys talk OSU at all?
There, say that again, Bruce.
Did you talk any about Goes U going up?
No, we got to get into that real quick. I'll schedule a show for that.
That should have been my pick of the week because I got to go down and watch it, but that was yeah, it was the last one of the Go series. That's it. That's the last one.
Oh my goodness.